Okay, Year 10, just a quick video on Screencastify to go through some of the questions that you're going to be doing in class. And if you're having trouble, you can watch this and see how we go. So in the last lesson, we looked at the index law, and we know that when we use a power, it's a shorthand way of writing the same number or algebra pronumeral multiplied by itself however many times is indicated in the power. So for example, here we can see 5 to the power of 4 is 5 times 5 times 5 times 5. Please do not think that that is 5 times 4 and equals 20. So these early ones here are pretty easy. So if I'm looking at question 3 and I have a look at question 3a, well, that's 9 times itself. 1, 2, 3, 4 times. So that's 9 to the power of 4. Okay, I'm not going to do all of these for you. So I'll just have a look at the first column, 3c. Well, that's 15, and it's times itself 1, 2, 3 times. So that's pretty easy. 15 to the power of 3. I have a little bit of a difficulty in 3e because I've got all these terms that are not the same. So I just have to separate them out a bit. So 3e, I can write like this. I can write, well, 4 times 4 times 4, because it doesn't matter what way I multiply, and times a times a times a times a. Now, 4 times 4 times 4, well, that's 4 to the power of 3, or 4 cubed. And times, that's a times itself 4 times, so a to the power of 4. But I don't need that multiplication sign in there, so I can just write 4 cubed, a to the 4. And if you're really smart, or you used your calculator, you'd do 4 cubed, and you'd realise that that's 64a to the 4. Now the answer's in the back of the book. They write that as, what is it, question 3. Yes, they just leave it as 4 cubed, which I'd be happy for you to do as well, because we're practicing index notation. So question 3 is pretty easy. Let's have a go or look at question 5. Now, remember we explained this by looking at a pattern, and the pattern we used was 3. So if we had 3 to the power of 3, well, that equals 3 times 3 times 3, which is 27. And now if we come down the pattern to the next one, and we go 3 squared, well, that's 3 times 3, which equals 9. And essentially we're going down the pattern. What have we done? Well, to get from 27 to 9, well, we've divided by 3. So when we go up, we multiply by 3, but when we come down, we're dividing by 3. So let's go down another one, 3 to the power of 1. Well, that's just 3 by itself. And again, to go from there to there, we've just divided by 3. So here comes a tricky one, 3 to the power of 0. Well, what would that be? Well, if we're following the pattern, we should just, again, divide by 3. And if we do that, we're going to get 1, which is the answer. But we can keep going in negative indices or negative powers. So 3 to the negative 1. So we just keep repeating this pattern. And that's what mathematics is all about. It's all about patterns. Divide by 3, and that will give us 1 over 3. So what about 3 to the negative 2? Well, we keep going with the pattern. We'll divide by 3 again, and we'll get 1 over, now this is interesting, 3 times 3, because the 3's on the bottom. Hey, that is the same as 1 over 3 squared. And this is where it gets really interesting. The negative, and a lot of students get lost here, because they want to put a negative sign in. The negative just means negative power or exponent or index just means 1 over whatever it is you had. Now that you know that, and look, they've indicated it here, there it is. Anything to the negative is 1 over. Now make sure that's in your notes, particularly for your study sheets for your exam. So now when we do these questions and we get y to the negative 3, well, that's easy. That's just 1 over y to the 3. But what about, and that's A, but what about E? Be careful here. Only the x is to the negative 2. The 3, don't touch it. Don't touch it. Only the x is to the negative 2, so it's 3 times 1 on x squared. And we don't want to write all that. We'll just put the 3 over the x squared. That's a bit of a tricky one. And if I look at I, 2x squared y to the minus 3, I, 2x squared y to the minus 3. Well, the 2 and the x, they're not to the negative power, so we'll just leave them alone, 2x squared. And y to the minus 3 just means 1 over the top of y cubed. And then I can write that all as one fraction, 2x squared y cubed. So that should help you with question 5. I've just done the first column of question 5. Make sure you put the note A equals, or you can use whatever letters you want, but make sure somewhere in your notes you have that the negative power just means 1 over the top. It doesn't put a negative in any part of the equation or the expression. So here it's just using this thing in reverse, doing the same thing in reverse, but they put a negative power in the bottom. So why does this work? Why does this work? Well, I'm going to do 6a the long way, but once you learn this, you can just jump in and change them. 1 over b to the negative 4. Well, b to the negative 4 means 1 over the top, so it's 1 over, well, look at this, I've got a fraction in a fraction. 1 over b to the 4. Now, what do we do when we divide by fractions? Now, if you remember, in one of our previous lessons, I said don't divide fractions. We multiply by the reciprocal, or as some of you like to say, flip it and rip it. So I have the 1 on top, and now I multiply by b on 4 on 1. I take the reciprocal of this, I turn it upside down, I flip it, and then I just get b to the 4 on 1, which is just b to the 4. So when you see one of these questions with 1 over the top, you can just turn them upside down. So again, let's now have a go at D. Well, no, I might do B first because it's exactly the same, except with different letters. I've got 1 over x to the minus 7. And because you don't need to do that every time, you just say, oh, well, that brings that positive. We make it a positive index and bring it to the top. Well, that's pretty easy. So let's have a look at D. And D is 5 over m to the minus 3. Oh, they've got a bit tricky. They've put a different number in the top. Don't let it faze you. Anything where the negative is in the bottom, when you've got a negative power in the top, in the denominator, in the bottom, you can just bring it to the top and change it to a positive. Leave that 5 alone, bring that m to the -3 to the top and make it a +3. So easy. If you just follow the rules, it's so easy. So in the last one, in G, I've got 5a squared on b to the -3. 5a squared on b to the -3. Well, leave the 5a squared alone. But that b to the -3, it's on the bottom. I can bring it to the top and just make it positive. How easy is that? That is brilliant. Okay, that brings us to the hardest question where I think you might have some trouble. So I'm going to erase this and I'm going to have a go at question 7. And this is all I want you to be able to do by next lesson. So you really need to practice some of these. So again, I'll do some of the ones from the first column so that you can have a go at some of the harder ones in the later 2 columns. So 7a. Well, I've got x cubed times x to the 4. Oh, gee, what am I going to do? Well, I can write it all out. That's going to be x times x times x. That's my x cubed. And I can have x times x times x times x. That's my x to the 4. And now I've written it all out. Well, that's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. So I have x to the power of 7. Gee, I don't want to do that all the time. I wonder if there's a quick way that I can see that I can get that power of 7 without having to write it out longhand. And there is. All you have to do is look at the powers. And because we're multiplying and they're the same base, both x's, I can add the powers to get that 7. See, 3 plus 4 is 7. Makes it so easy. So here's your rule. A, which can be anything, can be a pronumeral, it can be a number to some power, times a to a same or different power, I can just add them. And that's a very important rule that you should also have on your study notes. So question 7. Let's have a look at another one of these. I'm going to actually do 7b first to reinforce that concept. So p to the 5 times p to the 2. I can write it out, but that'll give me 5 p's and another 2 p's multiplied by each other. Or I can just use the shortcut that I now know and add the 5 and the 2 and get p to the 7. Let's skip now to d. And I've got d to the 4 times d. Now what you need to know is that's d to the 1. Anything that doesn't have a power is to the power of 1, because anything to the power of 1 is itself. Well, that makes it easy now. That's just d to the 4 plus 1, which is 5. Now, when we get numbers and pronumerals, remember I said when you're doing multiplication, do the numbers and then do the letters in alphabetical order. So I have 2 numbers here. There's a 1 in front of that p. Now remember, you can do the numbers on your calculator, but seriously, you should be able to do 2 times 1. That's 2. Now look at the pronumerals, the letters. I've got p squared times p cubed. Well, I just use my rule. P, and I add the powers to the power of 5. So, do the numbers. You can use your calculator if you really need to, but you should be able to do it without it. And then multiply the pronumerals using our new indices law. up here. All right, so let's have a go at J. Well, J, oh, goodness me. J doesn't have any numbers in it. Well, yes, it does. The number 1 is there, but 1 times 1 is 1. But we'll write it out. A squared B cubed times A cubed B to the power of 5. Well, there's no numbers. I can write, well, there's a 1 and a 1. There's a 1 there and there's a 1 there. 1 times 1 is 1, but I don't need to write that. I don't need that 1 there. A squared times A cubed. Well, I use my rule up here. That'll give me A. 2 plus 3 is 5. And now I look at the B's. Now, B cubed, so B times B times B, times B to the 5. B times B times B times B times B. Well, 5 and 3 is 8, so I'll just write B to the 8. Once you learn the rules, it becomes very simple. Let's have a look at M. I've got 3A squared B, remember that's B to the 1, times 5A to the 1, B to the 5. You don't need to write the 1 there if you're smart enough to know that it's there. Again, do the numbers first. 3 times 5, well, that's 15. Now do the letters and do them in alphabetical order. So I've got A squared times A to the 1. Well, I just add the powers. That'll give me A cubed, or A to the 3. I've got B to the 1 times B to the 5. Well, that'll be B, add the powers, B to the 6. Last one, and then you're on your own. P. I've got negative 4 P cubed C squared. And look at them, they've written the C second. That's a bit silly. And then they've done 2PC. Now there's a 1 above the P and there's a 1 above the C. As I said, do the numbers first. So 4 times 2 is 8, but there's a negative there, so negative 8. Now the back of the book is wrong. It writes it as PC, and that's why it's written here, but it shouldn't be. You should write it in alphabetical order. So I'm going to do it properly. So we've got C squared times C to the power of 1. So that'll be C to the power of 3. Add the powers. And then we've got P cubed times P to the power of 1. Add the powers again, and I'll get P to the power of 4. Now you wouldn't be wrong if you wrote P negative 8 P to the 4 C cubed, but we like to write things in alphabetical order. It just gives us a method of doing these things so that all answers will be in the same order, or the same, given in the same expression, the same. So that's questions 5, 6, and 7. You should be able to do them. And 3. Please make sure you're making good notes and writing out the rules as you go along. All right, I'll see you next lesson.